Welcome, and thank you for joining us on our live stream. We believe here at Active that you are worth knowing, so we created this content designed for you to explore your faith and belief wherever you're at. So welcome, and please enjoy the message.
Well, good morning. How are you today? Just amazing to worship with you guys and love being here and with Mike and with Joe at the team at Redlands. And so we want to just welcome those of you that are at Redlands at that location today. We know you guys are killing it there. I feel like I'm really kind of part of your church because Mike and I talk all the time, and he blows up my phone and texts me on a regular basis, and we talk about life in church. And you guys are led by just an incredible team of people. And I travel enough to see teams and amazing churches around our nation, but this is one of the up and coming, and you guys are really having an impact in Yucaipa and in Redlands and just around this entire region. So it's so great to be with you today. Well, I love being a parent. Many of you are the same, or many of you maybe have been, or you desire someday to be. And it has all these challenges and all these amazing and emotional moments. Someone once said that a father is someone who carries pictures where their money used to be. And that's me. And today we're concluding this No Such Thing series, and our focus today is not on, and hasn't in this series has been not on being a perfect parent, but on actually being a parent who is intentional and a family that is the same. And if there's two things that give me so much anxiety and so much fear, it's parenting and that process and flying. Which is funny because I fly a lot and I have parented a lot. My wife and I have two kids. They're older now. So Ashley's 23 and Austin is 21 years old. And they are really the greatest thing that has ever happened to us in our lives. But there's been a lot of anxiety through the years around this and this process. And someone asked me recently, what has it been like to be a parent? And I actually said, parenting is a lot like flying, which is probably where the anxiety and the fear and gripping the armrest come from. The journey of parenting is a lot like the joy of air travel. And let me illustrate a little bit here and walk you through it. And a lot of you are just going to completely relate to this. The first thing that happens when you're going to go on a trip, if you're going to fly, is that you are really expectant. There is those expectations. You decide to go somewhere, you've got some destination, and you're pumped maybe for weeks. You're just excited. You've already made a packing list and you've marked it in your calendar and you can't wait to go. Well, that's what happens when we find out that we're preggo. We're pregnant, right? We're expecting. We're so excited, woo, right? And now they have to have this whole production on Instagram. You know, is it blue or is it pink or boy or girl? It's like this whole thing, right? And you read books. And throughout that 9-month period, you prepare yourself as best as possible. You buy things. Maybe you prep a room, especially if it's your first. And you're just so expectant is what has happened because you are about to go on a journey. And then the day arrives. For us that are flying, we call it, takeoff. You get in the plane. You buckle your seatbelt. I remember the day my wife and I went to the hospital for our first. Man, it was awesome. My wife was struggling a little bit, but it was just an incredible experience for me. I mean, I'm there, she's there screaming, laying in the bed. And I remember literally going down to the cafeteria at this hospital and getting some Cheetos and some Gatorade. They had that big comfy chair for the dads to sit in, So I'm just sitting there drinking my Gatorade while she's having contractions. It was awesome. And then within just a short period of time, all of a sudden you were a parent. You have this little person that you're going to take home. And all that means and all that comes along with that, and how to bundle them and how to get them to sleep and how to feed them and how to protect them and all those things. But eventually, after takeoff, we all love this part, you hit cruising altitude. Love that. The little bing goes off in the cabin as you're flying, and they say you can now take out your laptops and, you get up and move around the cabin. For us, cruising altitude, it's not an exact science, but it's that 8 to 12-year-old period, right? Where they're maybe even a little early, where they're no longer like they can bathe themselves, they can go to the restroom themselves, they can eat in restaurants with you, right? They can sort of take care of themselves. They actually like you. They're kind of fun most of the time to be around. You're cruising. I mean, there's challenges, don't get me wrong. You know, there's moments and you ground them or you do whatever, you know, you put some garbage. But man, it's kind of cruising altitude. Things are great. I love that season of our parenting. But like anything, this is the part I hate about flying. Eventually, you hit turbulence. You know, it's when, it's like middle school. Right? Little Johnny, right? It's not so sweet anymore. In fact, Johnny doesn't even smell sweet anymore. Right? Little Susie, she's got relational issues. She spends way too much time on her phone. It's just drama, drama, drama during this season. If you're in middle school and you're here, you're watching today, pray for your parents, okay? Pray up to them because it is a turbulent time in parenthood, trying to figure out how to navigate. And you wonder, why did we do this? Why did I get on this plane? Why didn't I drive, right? But eventually, we start into the descent. I don't know exactly when this happens. Sometimes it takes longer than others. But for me, I experienced it sort of as my kids got into their older teenage years, right? They're maybe junior, senior in high school. We kind of survived all that. We started having like adult conversations. Right, we started having preparation for them to leave, preparation for that. They would hug us even occasionally, even though there's still some tension in parenting and they're starting to separate and pull away. But at least you can see the finish line from there. And then we land, right? The landing happens. You want to nail the landing. You know, it's graduation. It's graduation day, or they get their first job, or they get that acceptance letter. I remember at graduation, like we're all clapping and everything, and they think we're clapping for them. We're clapping for us. All the parents are like, yes, strong work, way to go, right? And all the students think we're excited for them because we're landing. We're finally getting to the destination that we desired to be at way back when all we had was expectations. We had no idea how that was going to be to take off or what all of that was going to feel like. And so finally we land and we pull up to the gate and we're at arrival. Now, this is a whole nother sermon about how can we get them off the plane, right? Like, we've arrived, you're 25, get off the plane. Amen. That's something for another day. But there's such a connection between how we fly and our parenting experience. And so today it's my job to sort of land the plane of this No Such Thing series, to kind of give us some direction and some final words, because that's where we are. And this series has been made. I went back and watched, and Mike has given you some amazing content and some perspective on this journey of family and parenting. I didn't realize there was going to be homework every week, but it was there. And this series has dealt with myths and with truths. So I want to start with that myth today that some of you have maybe bought into and some of the truths that I've learned, and we're just going to unpack that experience together. So here's the myth, and I'll give you the truth, and then we'll unpack it for the next few minutes. The myth is this, is that when you face the journey, the flight of parenting, somehow we think that it's only that you can be successful if you're only focusing on a solid parental strategy. Like, I've read books, I've listened to podcasts, and you think if I have the right strategy, the right secret, everything will work out. I think that's a myth. The truth is simply this: it's really about being vigilant with your values. Being vigilant to your values. You can have a strategy, but you need to be vigilant to your values. Andy Stanley suggested this a few years ago. He said, your greatest contribution to the kingdom of God may not be something that you do, but the someone that you raise. And I believe that that's true. But as we attempt to make that great contribution through our families and through raising our kids, there may never be a time that's more challenging for families than the time in which you and I live today. And so no matter what your family looks like, you can be a blended family, You could be a single parent family, a step family. You could have a nuclear family, a divorced family, the Manson family. Whatever yours may look like today, I want to start by unpacking some important words from the New Testament. We need to start there as a foundation, especially as it relates to values. And wherever you are in this journey that we call parenting, I want to ask God to just speak to you. Just to speak to you boldly as you are hearing this today, because we've got to get a bit abnormal. Because normal isn't working for a lot of our families. Normal isn't working. So I'm going to start in Romans chapter 12. I'm going to write these right here in the middle of our journey. Romans chapter 12. And this is kind of the foundation of these value conversations I want to have. Beginning in verse 9, this is a New Living Translation. Paul says this: don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hate it. Hold tightly to what is good. Verse 10, love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Can you imagine how it would transform families if these words that we just heard, that we just read right here, became the core value and the creed of every family? Can you imagine when we look at this little phrase, take delight in honoring each other? You imagine how that could be transformational for us? What does this mean? It means you place a high price tag or a value on someone else. What would happen if you took the moment and you began to live your life by placing this high value on your wife, and your son, your daughter, your father and mother? And what does that honor really look like? The first part of this passage paints a picture of it when it says this: don't just pretend. Don't just go through the motions. Don't just pretend to love each other. Really love others. Active Church, the story we're telling, let's not fake it. Let's not fake it. Let love be like the love that God has for us. Let it be deep. Let it be wide and honest and sacrificial and selfless. No strings attached. 1 Corinthians 13 says it in ways that we've heard many times, but perhaps need to reflect again in relation to our family dynamics, when Paul says, love never gives up. Love believes with relentless, love that word, relentless conviction. Love does not compete. Love doesn't boast. Love honors by considering first the needs of others. Love, this is a hard one. Love does not keep score of each other's mistakes. Love looks for the best. Love believes the best. Love never fails. Love is more than an Instagram post or a Facebook update. As we fight for our kids, we fight for our family, let's lean into this type of 1 Corinthians love. But also, lastly, let's be wise. One more time we hear from Paul in Ephesians chapter 5. Be wise, he says. Be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise, and make the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. As the days get more evil, we got to get more wise and more wisdom. And you have to be prepared to be viewed once in a while as just simply being weird, being different. Because if you want what normal families have, do what normal families do. But if you want what few families have, be courageous. Be courageous, active in your story, and do what few families do. I like to say it this way. Strategy, whatever you want to do in your family, drives your vision. How do you see your family in the future? Through your values. What do we believe about ourselves towards the ultimate mission? So if your mission is to lead your children and lead your family in a direction that would be transformative, so that they would connect with Jesus, and so that their lives would be fruitful and have significance and have purpose, if that's the ultimate mission, then our strategy, what we do every day, has to lead us to a vision of what tomorrow will look like without violating the values of who you and I are in Christ and as families. And that's why today I want to just land this plane by talking to you mostly about values, because it begins with determining what we value. As parents, as families, as followers of Christ, as the point person in our homes. And our family values, your and mine, are either what we create or what we allow. So in other words, you have values. You may not even know them, you may not talk about them, but it's what you create versus what you allow. If your home is chaotic and loud and it's people screaming at each other and there's tension and it's craziness and it's just chaos, I would say you have some values there, right? But if there's values, we're gonna eat together. We're gonna have dinner together 2 or 3 nights a week. We're gonna have some limits on certain things. We'll talk about that in just a moment. We're gonna get up in the morning at a reasonable time and not rush out the door. Those are values, right? But your values are either what you create or you're allowing. And I'm gonna encourage you today to create some. And not just allow life and what's normal to drive those things. That's what Paul says is wise. That's what he says to the Ephesians is wise. Every home has values. So what does your parenting and what does your family say that you value? And you say, I'm not sure. Okay, let me help you. There's one thing that's the indicator of the value system that you have in your home. It's one word, and it's this word: time. Time. If you look at your time, it's going to start to tell a story and a narrative about what you actually value. And what do normal families look like in regards to time? I would say these things: overscheduled, overcommitted, overwhelmed, out of control, frantic, exhausted, right? How do we greet each other normally? Hey, you see each other like, hey, Mike, how you doing? Oh, man, I'm busy. Oh, yeah. I'm busy too. I'm really busy. I know, man. I'm busy, right? It's like we're having a conversation that's a competition in the lobby. I'm so busy. I'd love to just freak people out sometimes. Go, yeah, I'm not busy. I'm kind of bored, actually. Not much going on. I think it would just sort of stop the conversation. They just walk away stunned. Like, he's weird. In 1967, the year I was born, expert witnesses actually stood before a Senate committee and said that because of all the time-saving technology that was being developed, in 20 years, that would have been 1987, people would be working only an average of 32 weeks out of the year and only 22 hours a week. How's that working for you? Is your primary challenge in regard to time in your life trying to figure out what to do with all the leftover stuff, all the leftover time you have? Man, it's got to fill my time with something. Something tells me no. And about that time, there was this popular restaurant that was introduced in our nation. It wasn't about the quality of the food or the basis of the price, but it was on the basis of how fast could they get the meal out, right? We call them fast food restaurants. Not good food, but fast food. So we loved it. But even then it was too slow because you actually had to park your car and walk inside and talk to somebody, sit at a table. It took too much time. So we invented the drive-up window. That way families could eat in their SUVs and minivans just as God intended it to be. And now, this morning, I got my coffee at Starbucks and I went to this actually was funny, I thought about this morning. I went to a only drive-up Starbucks, only over in San Bernardino, and I mobile ordered. So I had to get out of my car and walk up to the walk-up window at an only drive-up Starbucks to retrieve my coffee. Wow, that was so convenient. Didn't even have to talk to anybody. It was just sitting there outside the window, gone, right? Because time is important. And we live in a world where the ethic is work more, do more, accomplish more, be more productive, and that is just normal. And normal is an insane pace. Mike talked about this last week about success and our pursuit of that somehow that will make us significant, and that seems normal. And so we spend our time doing that. But just because it's normal doesn't mean that it's working. Remember, our values are either what we create or what we allow. So what if we used our time that we have, and it's limited, that's the one thing we don't have we can't create more. What if we used our time to leverage the most important values for our families, right? If you're a grandma and grandpa and you're sitting here, or you're watching this and you think, well, this doesn't apply to me. How can you leverage your knowledge and your contribution to your family to continue to help establish values that will legacy down through generations? How can you create a strategy that sees a picture of tomorrow that's awesome for your family, that can connect to really, really important and Christ-led values so that the mission of leading our kids into growing relationships with Christ can be accomplished? It's about values. Let me give you 4 real quick. 4 that I've learned. You have more, but let me speak to this idea, my top 4, of how we leverage our time wisely to create some core values in our lives. I'd love for you to write these down, talk about them as you scurry through the drive-through window today to get to wherever you need to go as a family. Talk about these things. Here's number 1. Number 1 is, what if we had a value that said we will create space for meaningful moments and memories? For meaningful moments and memories. Though we should spend as much time as possible with our kids and with our family, I would say it's even more important that we spend meaningful time with them. Do you know that as a parent, you only have about 940 Saturdays between a child's birth and before they will become an adult and maybe leave? 940 Saturdays. So if your child is 5 years old, 260 of those Saturdays are already gone. That's a little stunning. But we can make it meaningful. Our family, we used to do really meaningful, meaningless things, right? We actually enjoy, don't hate me, watching TV around the coffee table. We didn't sit at the table all the time. Sometimes we'd turn on the TV and we'd all sit around in our spots. And we'd talk and we'd laugh. And at that time, we'd watch reruns of West Wing or whatever on Netflix. And we'd sit down and we'd do that as a family. And we'd recap our days. And we'd bond together. And we'd go outside on a great evening and we'd light up our little fire pit. It's Vegas, right? So it's like this big, like be careful. And we'd cook some s'mores and marshmallows. And it'd get down to like 60 degrees and we'd wrap blankets around ourselves. And we'd cook s'mores. Those weren't crazy moments, but they were meaningful moments. They were moments with memories. Because the meaningless moments often become meaningful memories in our families. Everything doesn't have to be Disneyland and massive and significant. Simple moments can resonate. And we're competing in our time with all the distractions, including the device we all hold in our hands. So let's make meaningful moments a core value, all right? Number 1, create space for meaningful moments of memory. Number 2 is this. In the midst of that, let's create appropriate boundaries. And it may not be what you think, because I'd say we need to create appropriate boundaries for them, your children, and for you as a parent. That we not let the chaotic pace of what has become normal pull us in all these directions. Every one of us ought to have things we love, sports and activities and interests. None of those things are bad, but it's wise to be careful and appropriate. Boundaries, mom and dad, are often you saying no for your kids. For your kids when it comes to all the extracurricular options. I'm astounded by parents I talk to all the time. I love them, but I'm astounded by them, who are able to draw boundaries in so many areas of their lives, but are unable to say no for anything for their kids, and they wonder why their lives are so crazy. And they're living at a pace that is unsustainable, but even worse, it's unbiblical. It's not what God intended. Weird families know not to just pretend they love each other, as Paul said in Romans 12, but to actually love each other. And you do this by creating a value that says, we have healthy, appropriate boundaries when it comes to your time and my time, when it comes to your activities and my activities. This is demonstrating, even though it's often tough, a value of love. This is where we need to create and not just allow. And you start to involve your kids as they get into dissent around these boundaries. It's great learning for us. When should you be home? You're 17 now. You can be home at 7 or 7:30. When should you start dating? Let's talk about it. Before or after the age of 30? Let's talk. Let's have a conversation, right? And hey, mom and dad, we need some appropriate boundaries as well. We really do. Guardrails. I don't want my family, even now, to just know somehow that I love them with my heart. I want them to know that I love them with my schedule. They can see my schedule. They don't always see my heart. I don't know if it's ever happened to any family where the kids go, Dad, we've spent way too much time together. Just go to work. Will you just please go to work? Like, go away. And to ask our families to take nothing but leftovers from us does not set us up for success. Create a value that says, I love you enough to create the appropriate boundaries, especially in regards to time and activities for us. And with this value of boundaries in mind, here's number 3, that we create environments filled with healthy aspirations. Healthy. Verse 9, Romans 12 says, hate what is wrong. Hate the things that are going to be destructive to your family. Instead, hold to what is good. It means fill our homes with things that bring a good vibe, that bring a great environment to our homes. And healthy aspirations are actually something that are important to forming a strong environment. When a woman is pregnant, we say she is expecting. And then from that moment on, our kids arrive and we expect things from them. And that's okay, right? Parenting, in many of us, we view it as the last chance to see someone be everything that we hope to be. We want to get it right. We want it to be perfect for them, we say, and that's where we run into problems, because it never is. My son, he's 21 now, but he got interested in golf. He's a little golfer. So when he was about 11 years old, he had started playing, and we did what parents do, right? Like we go, he is going to be awesome. He is going to be the next Tiger Woods. And so we signed him up for a tournament. First tournament ever. We are nervous. He's fine. We are nervous, right? We go to the tournament, and he tees it up, and he hits his shot, and it was fine. I mean, he's hitting it all over the place or whatever. But I'm watching, and after a few holes, I'm walking along, and I'm noticing some things, because all the other kids, man, they look like golfers. I mean, they've got the shirts and the shorts, and they've got these bags. They're just this towel hung over their bag, and they're walking, and they just look great. And my kid's got this bag that I gave him and handed down to him because it was no good for me. And it's hanging all the way to the ground, and he's dragging it down the fairways. It's clunking along. And I'm like, it's good for him, right? It's like, it's okay. He looks fine. I mean, I know these other kids look like that. It's fine. Teaches him character. Makes him stronger. All those things went through my mind. But when we were done, we went straight to Golf Galaxy. I bought him a $100 golf bag, and I stuck those clubs. When we came back the next day, he looked good. Didn't play any better, but he looked good, right? Because no parent wants to be embarrassed, because we have expectations of our children and what we want from them. I needed him to look good. I needed him to be good. When he made a putt, I felt pretty good about myself. When he was hacking it around in the trees, it was pretty embarrassing to be me at that moment. It's a hard tension between aspiration and expectation, especially when you throw in realization. Here's what's real. And most of us lurch between the light and the dark, between frustration with little Junior that he didn't follow the right path, ours, and irritation with the demands we continue to make in our lives. There's a book by Ron Forner he wrote called Love That Boy. It's a great book. It's a true story of his journey to truly love his son and to not pretend, even when at the age of 12 they discovered that his son had Asperger's. And it just describes his own personal journey and struggle to really adjust his expectations while not losing his aspirations for his son, because his son was not going to be on the honor roll. He was not going to be an achieving, sports-loving son that he had always envisioned. And he said this in the book. He said, a parent's love is largely unconditional. A parent's satisfaction often comes with caveats. Of course, we need to have those things that we're encouraging our children to do and to go after. We need to be aware of their interest and what brings them joy and excitement. We need to push them at times. There are expectations that we place on them that are appropriate. But let it be around things that involve character and faith, not just goals scored and trophies won and certificates received and AP classes they're taking. My job, I learned, as a parent is not to dictate their future, but the greatest aspiration should be to guide them towards falling in love with Christ, whatever their future may be. Craig Rochelle said, our greatest priority as Christian parents is to gradually transfer our children's dependence away from us until it rests solely on God. Which leads to our last value, our final one. Value number 4 that I would suggest to you is that we create a faith-filled focus and a future. And I'm so grateful for the ministries of the church that I get to serve, which came alongside my wife and I in this process. When we moved back to Vegas, we joined the staff of the church that I'm at now, The Crossing. Our kids were in 6th grade and 3rd grade, respectively. And we were nervous, like you would be as a parent, that our kids would actually connect. I'm so grateful that through their years of cruising and turbulence and descent and all those things, that we had youth leaders and student ministry pastors and elementary teachers who poured themselves into our kids, complementing the values that we had for them. We couldn't have done it without them. And I know you are grateful and so thankful that you don't have to spend a day walking alone when it comes to the faith, the future of your child. But there's a next-gen ministry here at Active that's dynamic, loves your kids, who influences your kids. We have leaders even right now in different areas at our locations. We're ministering to kids, praying for them, giving your kids a safe place to talk about things. Perhaps even at some point, an opportunity to go to a camp and to meet God at a deeper level, or to discover their gifts on a mission trip somewhere. It's part of the great legacy of churches like Active, who are impacting not just communities, but impacting families, one family at a time, and impacting the next generation. Because as a church, as Active Church, we will always say yes to the next generation and to their story. We always say yes to their future. Just a few years ago, we got our first taste of empty nesting. It was spring break. My kids were older, and both of our kids on their own, one of them got on a plane and went to Belize, and the other one went to the Philippines, all in 10 days. It was humbling. My wife and I went to Disneyland. I'm serious. They're out changing the world. We went and saw Mickey. But it was a great moment for us to see that. And so parents, let me be candid with you as we start to land this. I just want to challenge you today in love. So many of you are making choices that are actually potentially limiting your child's spiritual growth. And you're missing opportunities offered to you and afforded to you by amazing people who are around here, who are wanting and ready to walk alongside you on this flight of parenting. I get so frustrated with parents who refuse to make maybe the weird but wise choices when it comes to their kids' spiritual development. They'll pay hundreds of dollars and sign their kids up for every activity and sport and club thing and advanced thing. But when it comes to their spiritual development, they sort of give it a wink and a nod and hope that it works out someday. Let's step back a little from that. We're driving our kids round and around every night of the week, hitting drive-thrus, eating dinner on our laps, while we're struggling to get them engaged in spiritual environments. Parents, I just got to be candid with you. If it's you, I would ask you to step back, look in the mirror, and consider whether you're making wise choices in those areas. Don't be the parent that begins to land that parental plane, and little Johnny no longer wants anything to do with God, is disconnected from their faith. And you're sitting in the office across from Mike saying, I don't get it. I get it. You're reaping the values that you have sown. Because values are either what we create or what we allow. So let's play soccer, let's do activities, let's do it all. But let's make sure that we place a high value on that spiritual development of my child. Because trust me, when they're 25 and they're no longer in that place where they're throwing the baseball or shooting the basket or kicking the soccer ball, you want them to be in a place where they are tightly connected with Jesus. You want them to be there. So the question is, when it comes to our faith, what are we allowing and what are we creating? And let me give you some hints. Let me give you a little secret look. I don't know about the pastoral team. I don't know about Mike's house, but as a pastor, let me give you a little secret, because some of you're thinking right now, you're going, pastor's kid went to Belize on spring break. Ooh, right? Pastor's kid went to... Let me give you a little secret. Some of you think that the pastor's house, like we just listen to Hillsong worship all day. right? It just plays. When our kids came home from school, they would just fall. They would like lay out in the Spirit. God would just slap them as they walked in the door, right? That's what you think. But that's not accurate at all. It wasn't a monastery. It wasn't family bliss. Here's what we learned, my wife and I, about a faith-filled future for our kid. It's not a program. It's something we portray every day, that we have spiritual conversations constantly with our kids in the midst of life that is happening and going all the time. If something happens on the soccer field, you discuss it on the drive home and you put it in a spiritual context. There begins to be drama at school, you discuss it and it begins to be a spiritual moment. You guide them to see their faith, not in a devotional book or something that just happens on Sunday, but faith that is a part of their daily walk. You pray with your kids, but you have spiritual conversations with your kids wherever the opportunity allows. And you spend your time and energy and even money to impress that on them. Grab your kids, have them serve alongside you, invest in them, forming them, being intentional in forming their faith so that when they arrive, they'll have the best opportunity to be in close relationship with Christ. And you say, that would be so weird. Exactly. If you want what normal families have, then do what normal families do. Here's the idea I want you to go home with. Again, if you want what few families have, be courageous and do what few families do, because time flies. Our days are numbered, our time is limited. This is the most recent actual picture that I have of my daughter and Ashley and I. She just got married 2 months ago. So this is us, right? And for us, we've landed the plane. I mean, I remember when we were in takeoff phase, we're in the delivery room. I remember all those times when she was dedicated on a Mother's Day weekend at church. I remember we used to throw the softball in the backyard. It was awesome. And when I look now, and many of you can relate to this, it seems like it was just yesterday, but now she's this sharp gal. She's educated, she's married, and she loves God. She loves people. And it reminds me of the words of Jesus when it comes to home building. Listen to these words of mine, he said, and build your house on the rock of my words, my wisdom. Because if you don't build on a solid foundation and you choose to build on sand, your house will be shaky and in danger of sinking. So I want to say to you today as we close, there's no such thing as normal. Don't be like everybody else. There's no such thing as normal. You're going to have to be a little bit weird. You're going to have to want what few families have, and you're going to have to do what few families do. And some of you today, you're in that moment where it's like you've got some choices to make. You might even be in turbulence. And the choices around values that you make in this season of your life will go a long way in determining how you land the parental plane that you're piloting right now, all right? I want to pray with you just for a moment. And I just want to ask you to bow your heads if wherever you're watching or wherever you're seated today. As I'm praying, I want to say just one word to some of you. And I don't know if it's relevant to you, but if it is, take this. Some of you, you're listening to these words. Maybe you've listened to this entire series. And one of the things you've wrestled with is you realize that there's a gap. You realize that there's a gap between the parent that you wanted to be, the family that you wanted to have, and what's currently true. And I just want to encourage you today. Our role, our desire is not to heap guilt or regret or frustration, but to begin to say, let's start now. To begin to say, things can change. You can change. Opportunity is still there. So as I pray for you today, I want to encourage you and I want to lead you in a prayer that hopefully will lead to some great conversations around impact and change in your life. Father, I just pray right now, in Jesus' name, I pray for those that are listening today and what is transpiring in homes around this community. And God, I just pray right now that we would understand and we would hold tightly to this fact that there is no such thing as normal, that we don't want to be normal, but that we would love to be right in the center of what you have for us. God, I pray today that as we reflect on our homes, on our parenting, on our kids, God, that you would help us to strive to instill the values that would reflect you. God, that you would be pleased with. And God, where we are weak, where we have failed, Be strong in us. God, give us new life. Give us new hope, we pray. God, there's no such thing as it being done. God, we continue to believe that you'll work in and through our families to greater things ahead. And we're grateful for that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you again for joining us for this week's message. We believe your generosity is changing the world. If you'd like to partner with us, click the link in the description below. And we'll see you again next week.